Namsa froze in the doorway, her heartbeat slamming in her ears. Her father placed her own apartment keys in Jabari's hands and said calmly, "Your brother needs stability. You'll manage somewhere else." She watched Jabari's fingers close around the keys she worked years to earn. Her home, her safety, her life, handed over like it meant nothing. In that moment, Namsa felt something inside her crack, and something much stronger begin to rise. Namsa reached her apartment tired but happy, holding a small cake she bought to celebrate her promotion. She had planned a quiet evening for herself, something simple that made her proud of how far she had come. But as she walked down the hallway, she heard familiar voices coming from inside her home. Her smile slowly faded. The door was unlocked. When she stepped in, her father, mother, and younger brother Jabari were already sitting comfortably in her living room, as if they owned the place. Jabari's shoes were on her table, her TV remote in his hand, and her mother was giving her a strange, forced smile. Namsa felt something twist in her chest. She hadn't invited them. No one told her they were coming. Before she could ask what was happening, her father stood up with a serious face. He didn't congratulate her on her promotion. He didn't ask how she was doing. Instead, he cleared his throat and said he had made a decision for the family. His tone sounded final, like he wasn't expecting her opinion at all. Jabari leaned back, looking completely relaxed, as if he already knew what was coming. Namsa felt a sudden heaviness in her body, like her feet were glued to the floor. Then her father said the words that made her heart drop. Jabari would be moving into her apartment permanently. Not for a night, not for a week, permanently. Namsa blinked, thinking maybe she misheard. This was her home. She paid the rent. She bought the furniture. She worked late nights and early mornings to keep this place running. But her father spoke like she didn't matter, like her effort was nothing. Her mother quickly added that Jabari needed the space more than she did, and that it was for the good of the family. Jabari didn't even look guilty. He just smirked, tapping his foot on her table. The small cake in Namsa's hand felt heavier. The celebration she had planned disappeared from her mind. Instead, all she could think about was how easily they were taking everything she built, everything she earned. They didn't even ask her. They simply decided. In that moment, Namsa felt her happiness slip away, replaced by a cold pain she couldn't explain. Her family wasn't here to celebrate her promotion. They were here to take her home. Namsa stood there, trying to understand why this was happening, when her mother suddenly spoke in a soft, shaky voice. She said Jabari was struggling, that life had been too hard for him, and he needed a stable environment to get back on track. Her father nodded slowly, pretending this was a painful decision they had to make. They acted as if they were protecting Jabari from the world, as if he was helpless and broken. But Namsa knew the truth better than anyone. Jabari wasn't struggling. He partied every night, slept all day, and refused to keep any job for more than a week. When things went wrong, he blamed everyone but himself, and her parents always rushed to defend him. They cleaned up his messes, paid his debts, and told the world he was just going through a phase. Now they wanted her apartment to be part of that same pattern. Namsa tried to speak calmly. She explained that Jabari didn't need a stable environment. He needed responsibility. He needed consequences. He needed to grow up. But the moment she said this, everything turned against her. Her father's eyes narrowed and he accused her of being heartless. Her mother gasped like Namsa had just insulted them. Jabari folded his arms and leaned back with a satisfied look, watching the drama play out in his favor. Namsa said she worked hard for this place, that she earned it. But her father quickly twisted her words, saying she only cared about a piece of property, and not her own family. Her mother wiped imaginary tears and said Namsa had changed, that she was too proud now, that success had made her forget where she came from. Old stories came out, stories Namsa never expected to hear again. Times when she couldn't pay for school books. Times when her parents helped her. Times when she cried as a child. They brought all of it back just to make her feel guilty, just to make her feel like she owed them something forever. Namsa felt her heart tighten as three voices pushed her, blamed her, cornered her. Every attempt she made to explain herself was shut down immediately. They didn't want to hear her. They didn't want the truth. They only wanted her apartment, and they were willing to break her spirit to get it. Standing there, surrounded by people she loved, Namsa had never felt more alone. It was clear. This wasn't about Jabari's crisis. This was about control. And they had no intention of letting her stand in their way. Namsa was still trying to defend herself when her father suddenly stood up. His expression changed, hard, cold, final. Without warning, he walked straight to her handbag on the chair. Namsa's heart jumped. She stepped forward, but he was faster. He opened her purse and reached inside like he had every right to do it. Before she could even speak, he pulled out her apartment keys. Those keys she held tightly every day. Those keys she earned with long hours, double shifts, and skipped meals. He held them in his hand as if they didn't belong to her at all. Namsa froze. It felt like the air had been knocked out of her. Her father didn't look at her. He didn't ask permission. He simply walked toward Jabari, his favorite child, the one who never took anything seriously, and pressed the keys into his palm. He said, "This is for your good. Start fresh here." Jabari's face lit up with satisfaction. He didn't even pretend to look sad or guilty. He nodded proudly, already imagining the apartment as his new playground. And when his eyes met Namsa's, he smirked, a small smile that told her everything. He knew he had won. Namsa felt a deep shock spreading through her chest. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her home, her safe space, had just been handed away like a spare object. Her mother quickly stepped in, pretending to wipe tears. She said Namsa needed to be mature and think about her brother's future. She claimed this was temporary, that Namsa should understand family sacrifices. But her voice had no real sadness in it. Her tears looked practiced. Namsa felt a sting behind her eyes, but she refused to cry in front of them. She asked quietly, "Where am I supposed to go?" Her father didn't hesitate. He didn't even look guilty. He said Namsa could find somewhere small for now. He added that she had only 2 days to pack her things, 2 days to leave her own apartment, the place she had built, decorated, protected. Her mother nodded as if this was reasonable. Jabari jingled the keys in his hand, enjoying the sound, enjoying the moment. The betrayal settled deep in Namsa's heart. It felt cold, heavy, real. Her parents weren't choosing what was right. They were choosing convenience. Choosing their son. Choosing comfort over fairness. Namsa stood there silently, feeling her world tilt. The cake she bought, the celebration she planned, her joy. Everything disappeared. In its place came a quiet, painful understanding. They never valued her effort. They only valued what they could take from her. Namsa packed her things as quickly as she could, feeling numb. The apartment she had built with her own money, every corner decorated just the way she liked, was no longer hers. She found a tiny room in a small building just a few streets away. It was cramped, cold, and uncomfortable, but it was all she could manage on. Such short notice. She dropped her bags on the floor and sank onto the thin mattress, trying to hold back tears. Even as she settled in, a heavy guilt weighed on her chest. Something about how her parents had acted didn't sit right. Their decision had been sudden, too neat, too perfectly timed. It didn't feel like a family acting out of concern. Something felt wrong, but she couldn't put her finger on it yet. A few hours later, her phone rang. It was Jabari. He laughed as he spoke, bragging about how he had started renovating her apartment, making it more homey for him. He described small changes he claimed were for her, but his tone made it clear he was enjoying the control. Namsa felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Her mind raced. Had her parents really thought she would just leave, pack up, and accept it quietly? Why did they push so hard, so fast, without even asking? She remembered seeing neighbors glance at her apartment in the days before this disaster. Then she heard whispers from a few of them now. One mentioned that her father had been inside her apartment several times in the past weeks. Another said he was always asking questions about her property documents. Her stomach twisted. Everything started to make sense in a terrible, uneasy way. Their concern for Jabari, the sudden forced move, Jabari's smirking confidence. It wasn't about family or helping her brother. They had a plan. They had been preparing something behind her back. Namsa sat on the edge of her tiny bed, staring at the bare walls. The anger slowly began to mix with the sadness. She realized that she hadn't been seeing the full picture. There was more to this than just a greedy brother and parents taking her apartment. Something hidden, something dangerous to her, was buried in their rushed actions. She clenched her fists. She didn't have the answers yet, but she knew one thing. She couldn't let this go. She wouldn't just walk away quietly. If her parents had secrets, she would find them. If Jabari had plans, she would uncover them. Namsa's small room felt suffocating, but it also became the place where a new determination began to grow. Quiet, sharp, unstoppable. Namsa decided to check her old postal box, thinking maybe some letters had arrived before she moved. She hadn't expected much, just bills or junk mail, but as she sifted through the envelopes, one caught her eye. It was thicker than the rest, and her father's handwriting was scrawled across the front. She froze for a moment. Why had this never been delivered to her? With trembling hands, she opened the envelope. Inside were official documents stamped and signed, all in her name. Her eyes widened as she read. The papers proved that she had been approved for a homeowner's grant months ago. The apartment she had worked so hard to pay for had been meant to be legally hers alone. Every payment she had made, every sleepless night she spent working, every sacrifice, it had all been protected by law. Her mind spun. Why had her father never told her? Why had he and her mother forced her out so suddenly, pretending it was for her brother? She flipped through the papers again, her hands shaking. Every signature, every official seal screamed the truth. The apartment was hers. Namsa felt a mix of anger and disbelief. Her father had tried to intercept the process. He had deliberately kept the documents from her, hidden them, and used the family's stories about Jabari's struggle as an excuse to take her home. Everything they had said, every tear her mother had faked, every guilt-laden word, they had been lies. For the first time since this nightmare began, Namsa felt a spark of power. She wasn't just a powerless daughter being pushed around. She had proof. Solid proof. Her apartment, the place she had poured her heart into, was hers in every legal sense. Her father and mother had tried to trick her, but now she had the truth. She held the papers close to her chest, feeling a new sense of clarity. The betrayal was deeper than she had imagined, but so was the opportunity to fight back. Namsa's mind raced with possibilities. She could confront them. She could reclaim her home. She could finally make them see that she wasn't the weak, obedient daughter they had always expected her to be. Namsa took a deep breath, letting the weight of the discovery sink in. The hidden envelope wasn't just mail, it was the key to her justice. It changed everything. It turned her fear into determination and her sadness into quiet, burning strength. For the first time since her family had forced her out, Namsa felt she had a chance to take control, and she wasn't going to waste it. Namsa wasn't ready to talk to anyone about what had happened, but when her neighbor, Mrs. Dlamini, an older woman who had always been kind and watched Namsa grow up, knocked on her door with a gentle smile and an invitation for tea, she felt a small flicker of comfort. She agreed, thinking she could at least get a moment of peace and someone to listen. Sitting in Mrs. Dlamini's cozy kitchen, Namsa felt the warmth of the teacup in her hands, a stark contrast to the cold betrayal of her own family. Mrs. Dlamini poured the tea carefully and waited, letting Namsa take a deep breath before speaking. Then, in a voice low and serious, she started to reveal what Namsa had never imagined. "Namsa, I think you need to know the truth," Mrs. Dlamini said, eyes steady. "Your parents, they have been in debt for years, all because of Jabari's gambling. He's lost more money than you can imagine, and your father and mother have been covering for him, hiding it from everyone." Namsa's stomach twisted. She had always suspected Jabari was careless, but she never knew it had reached this point. Mrs. Dlamini continued, her voice calm but firm. "They didn't just push you out to be cruel. They wanted your apartment. They planned to use it as collateral for loans to cover his losses. That's why they rushed everything, forced you to move so quickly. They needed legal access to your property." Namsa's mind raced. Every sudden visit from her father, every whispered conversation she had overheard, every false story about Jabari needing help, it all started to make sense. They weren't concerned about him. They weren't thinking about family. They were thinking about money. Her home, her safety, everything she had worked for, had been at risk. She sat back, staring at her teacup as the truth settled in. Her parents had been lying for years. They had built a story to manipulate her, guilt her, and push her out without hesitation. Mrs. Dlamini reached out and touched Namsa's hand. "You have the power now," she said softly. "You know the truth, and the law is on your side. Don't let them take what is rightfully yours." Namsa felt a rush of clarity. The anger she had felt before was now sharper, focused. She wasn't just fighting for her apartment anymore. She was fighting for justice, for the truth, for herself. The betrayal was deep, but so was her determination. She realized that she could take control. And she would. No one, not even her family, could take that away from her now. Namsa sat alone in her tiny room, holding the documents Mrs. Dlamini had helped her understand. For hours she didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even think about crying. Something inside her had shifted. The sadness, the guilt, the endless begging for fairness, they all stopped. She realized that crying or pleading wouldn't bring back her home, or make her family see reason. She had to act, and she had to act smart. She began quietly, methodically. First, she collected all the bank statements she could find. Her own payments, her father's suspicious transfers, any trace of money moving around her apartment. She copied every message Jabari had sent boasting about the apartment, every email her parents had sent that hinted at control or interference. Every piece of paper, every digital trace was evidence of what had been done behind her back. As she worked, her anger transformed into focus. Her hands were steady now, her mind clear. The tears and despair of the past days were replaced by a calm, almost cold determination. She wasn't the same Namsa who had walked away in shock. She was sharper, smarter, and stronger. She felt herself becoming a version of herself she had never imagined. A version her parents would not recognize until it was too late. She organized everything carefully, filing documents, printing emails, and taking screenshots of conversations. Every detail mattered. Every proof she gathered was another brick in the wall she would build to protect herself. And with each piece she collected, the fear that had haunted her since her father handed Jabari her keys began to fade. For the first time, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel powerless. She didn't feel guilty for standing up to her parents or for seeing the truth about her brother. The world of manipulation and lies they had built around her was crumbling in her mind, replaced by a strategy and clarity she had never known before. Namsa's transformation was silent but undeniable. She didn't announce it, didn't show it on her face, didn't make promises to anyone. She simply changed inside. The quiet, focused, unshakable Namsa was emerging. The daughter who would no longer obey blindly, who would no longer be controlled, who would no longer accept betrayal. And in that stillness, in that quiet determination, Namsa realized that this was her breaking point, but also her turning point. The Namsa her family had tried to crush was gone. In her place stood someone they had never expected, someone calm, collected, and ready to reclaim everything that was rightfully hers. Namsa stood at the doorstep of her parents' house, her hands steady, her expression calm. She didn't feel the fear or hesitation she used to feel. The girl who had been pushed out, crying and pleading, was gone. Now she was here with proof, with power, and with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to lose but everything to reclaim. Her parents were in the living room when she walked in. They looked surprised to see her, but their surprise quickly turned to irritation. They expected her to apologize, to beg, maybe even to stay away quietly. Instead, Namsa walked straight to the dining table and placed a thick stack of documents down in front of them. She didn't say anything at first. She let the papers speak for themselves. Her father leaned forward, trying to glance at the top sheet, but Namsa calmly laid the documents so that every page was visible. Bank statements, messages, official property papers, emails, all neatly organized, all showing the truth. She pointed to the first page. The signatures her parents had forged to intercept her grant. The bank transfers covering Jabari's gambling debts. Every lie they had spun to justify taking her apartment. Her mother's face went pale. Her lips trembled. Namsa saw the panic in her father's eyes, the sudden rigidity in his posture. He had always believed she would never stand up to them, that she would obey out of guilt or fear. But now the truth was undeniable. The web of lies they had spun was unraveling right before them. Jabari froze, his smug expression disappearing. He glanced at the papers, then at his parents, then back at Namsa. The realization hit him like a punch to the stomach. Everything he had been counting on, his free ride in her apartment, the protection from consequences, the manipulation of the situation, was collapsing. His smirk vanished, replaced by panic and confusion. Namsa's voice was quiet but firm as she finally spoke. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply stated the facts, letting each revelation sink in. This is the truth. The apartment is mine. The debts are yours. The lies end here. Her parents couldn't meet her eyes. Their carefully constructed authority and control had been stripped away in an instant. Jabari's panic grew with every word. Namsa remained calm, collected, and unshakable, the version of herself they had never imagined. She wasn't the daughter who begged or pleaded anymore. She was the daughter who reclaimed her life, piece by piece, and made it impossible for anyone to take it away. In that moment, the house felt different. The walls that once echoed with control and manipulation now trembled under the weight of truth. Namsa had arrived, not as a victim, but as a force they could no longer ignore. Namsa stood outside her apartment, her heart steady, as the police officers confirmed the documents she had gathered. Every signature, every bank transfer, every official paper proved the apartment belonged to her alone. She handed the evidence over calmly, letting the officers read through everything. The truth was undeniable. Moments later, Jabari was escorted out. He tried to protest, his voice shaky and desperate, but no one listened. His smirk was gone, replaced by fear and anger. He glanced at Namsa, realizing for the first time that his games had failed. The apartment he had claimed as his playground was no longer his, and there was nothing he could do to take it back. Her father fell to his knees, begging, pleading with words that came out too late. He tried to apologize, tried to twist the story again, but Namsa didn't flinch. Her mother knelt as well, tears in her eyes, hands reaching out as if she could pull Namsa back into obedience. But Namsa had changed. She wasn't the daughter who begged for approval, who tolerated lies, who let others walk over her. She remained firm, silent, letting their guilt and desperation wash over her without affecting her resolve. For the first time in her life, she put herself first. She didn't yell, she didn't scream, she didn't argue. She simply stood tall and claimed what was rightfully hers. Namsa changed the locks one by one, securing her home in a way that symbolized more than ownership. It was a statement. This space belonged to her, and no one could take it away. Each click of the lock was a small victory, a mark of her independence, a way of leaving her old self behind, the scared, obedient girl who once let others dictate her life. As she walked through the apartment, she moved slowly, touching the walls, the furniture, the places she had made her own. Every corner told a story of her hard work, her late nights, her sacrifices. Every room was a reminder that she had fought for this, and she had won. The space felt alive again, filled with her presence, her strength, her choices. Namsa paused by the window, looking out at the city beyond. She breathed in deeply, letting the weight of the past days lift from her shoulders. She was free, not just in her home, but in her mind, in her heart. She had survived the betrayal, exposed the lies, and emerged stronger, smarter, and unshakable. This was her home, and she had claimed it fully. The girl who had cried, begged, and suffered was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth, respected herself, and would never allow anyone to take her life or her happiness from her again. Months passed, and Namsa's life slowly settled into a rhythm she had never truly known before. Her apartment was quiet, filled with the warmth of her own choices and the comfort of independence. No one barged in uninvited, no one twisted the truth to confuse her, and no one tried to control her. She didn't feel the need for revenge. She didn't think about the lies, the betrayal, or the pain anymore. She simply focused on herself, rebuilding her life quietly, day by day, step by step. She worked on her career, redecorated her apartment to reflect her taste, and surrounded herself with friends who respected her and valued her. Every small success, every peaceful evening, reminded her of how far she had come. Namsa had become stronger, smarter, and unbreakable. The fear and sadness that once clung to her like shadows had faded completely. One evening, she stood by the window, watching the sunset, painting the sky with soft oranges and pinks. The city hummed below her, but inside her apartment there was calm. She breathed in slowly, feeling the quiet strength she had built over the past months. Then, almost in a whisper to herself, she spoke the words that captured everything she had learned, everything she had become. I didn't lose a family. I lost the chains they wrapped around me. In that moment, Namsa understood the truth fully. The pain she had endured, the betrayal she had faced, it had freed her. in a way nothing else could. She had been carrying chains her family had placed on her heart, on her mind, on her life. And now she was finally free. She didn't need anyone's approval. She didn't need apologies. She didn't need validation from the people who had tried to control her. Her home was hers, her life was hers, and her future was hers to shape. The silence of her evenings, the security of her space, and the confidence in her decisions became the new foundation of her happiness. Namsa smiled softly as the sun disappeared behind the horizon. The world outside kept moving, but inside, she felt a sense of completion, a peace that had eluded her for so long. This was more than just reclaiming a home. It was reclaiming herself. And in that quiet, golden light, Namsa knew this was not an ending. It was the beginning of her true freedom, a life built on her own terms, strong, steady, and unbreakable.